Okay, yeah. Just for the recording, I just went over who I am and we're starting now. We have verbal reasoning. It basically tests how quickly you can remember information and read it, and your ability to search for smaller pieces of information in larger texts, and how strong your reading skills are. So essentially, it's kind of like in a medical environment, you'll have a lot of information presented in front of you, but you have to find out what's relevant quite quickly. And verbal reasoning is a bit like that. So it's testing your skill to be able to remember stuff quickly, but also find stuff quickly. And we'll talk more about each section in a bit of detail, but these are just the general overviews. You're going to have 44 questions and 21 minutes to answer them all, and these are going to be 11 different texts, and each text has got 4 different questions. For the rest of them, to be honest, I think everyone knows the timings and how many questions there are, but if you don't, then just check them out on the official UCAT website. But I'm more going to focus this session on how to approach these sections and actually maximize your scores. The next section to just briefly discuss is decision making, and it's a bit of a combination of verbal reasoning that we just saw and some maths and some other stuff. So you've got to work through things like Venn diagrams, short information pieces, logic games, puzzles, and some other weird quirks. And decision making, it's kind of like, as it says at the start, it's a combination of verbal reasoning and maths, but it's honestly a decent section as well. So involve things like Venn diagrams, syllogisms, and a bunch of other things. But yeah, I'll talk to you more about it in depth in a minute. Then you've got quantitative reasoning. Like I just said, it's basically just GCSE maths. It's usually the one that people score the highest in. I got 900 on this one, which is the maximum. So it basically carried my UCAT. And there are a mixture of difficult and easy questions that you need to work through strategically. And don't be worried if you don't do maths A-level. There's not going to be any like trigonometry or anything else. You don't need to worry about it. Honestly, this is a calm section that you need to just stat pad out so that you can do as best as possible. Then you got abstract reasoning. As the name suggests, it is quite abstract because you're looking at shapes and you're thinking what patterns are present. And again, it's quite similar and it parallels a medical school environment and the environment of being a doctor, because you have to look at things that might seem quite strange but try and find patterns out of them, whether this is things like test results or something else. You have to be able to find patterns and find sort of relationships in small sets of data. So that's what abstract reasoning is, and specifically with abstract reasoning in the UCAT, you're going to get different patterns of shapes, and you have to try and find out what rule each sort of set has in terms of the shape, and then you can answer questions about it. But like I said, if it sounds a bit waffly right now, that's because it is. I'm going to go into each of these things in more detail later. I'm just giving a general overview for anyone who's not seen them before. And then finally, you've got situational judgment. This was my personal favorite in terms of sections because it's not really mathsy, it's not verbal reasoning-y, it's just can you develop the skills to be a good doctor in the things like empathy, communication, and that sort of stuff. So as the name suggests, you're going to be presented with different scenarios and different situations, and you're going to be asked to evaluate them and just think to yourself, is this the right response? How important is this? And we'll talk about it more later. I've said that like a million times, but yeah, we'll talk about it in more detail. And for situational judgment, I've put a lot of notes in terms of what you need to know and what kept on coming up for me during the SJT. And so hopefully you'll be able to learn that as well. Because so many people for the situational judgment, they just say, oh yeah, you need to read the GMC guidelines. I'm not reading that. I'm not a slave. It's like 40 pages long. So I put together the things that appear the most. But yeah, in terms of your score, these 4 sections here are going to contribute to a numerical score. And your numerical score is out of 3,600. And generally, a score above 2,800 is super, super good. It will basically guarantee you an interview at any med school that accepts the UCAT. So try and aim for 2,800. When you quote your score to people, you usually say average. So yeah, it's apart from Bristol and King's. So 2,800 is a solid score, but if you want to be proper safe, aim for 3,000, right? So each section is out of 900, and when you add them together, you want to essentially aim to get above 3,000. But generally, the top 10%, well, this year, the top 10% was 2870 plus. So as long as you get in the top decile, which means the top 10% of sitters, then it's perfectly fine. I'm not an international myself, but the thing is, I know that it's usually higher. So if for us, the top 10% could be 2,870, in terms of internationals, maybe you'd want to be aiming for 3,100 or higher. That's just a ballpark figure. Me, I got 2,950 band 1. I kind of flopped verbal reasoning, which is why I got a little bit lower than I wanted to. But still, I got into the top 10% easy, got all my interviews, and got an offer from King's, which is the highest UCAT med school in the UK. So, moving on, we're going to talk about each section bit by bit now, and we're going to begin by talking about verbal reasoning. And like I said to my boy Kevin before, everyone dislikes this section a lot because you think to yourself, yeah, I'm going to do medicine, I'm going to do or dentistry. All I have to worry about now is biology or chemistry, and then you've got this bullshit that's asking you to do flipping English. It's such a waste of time. But that's not what you see on the surface. In reality, it does parallel medicine quite a lot. You've got a large amount of information, and you want to select out the relevant parts in the best way that you can. So the first thing to say for verbal reasoning is you don't need to be good at English for this section. Generally, like, you don't need to have knowledge of fancy words. You don't need to have knowledge of paragraph structures and all that kind of stuff you might need it at GCSE or A level. You just need to understand and be able to comprehend content. And the technique that I'm going to talk to you about is the one that I used. And to be honest, I wasn't someone that was really confident with English because, you know, I didn't really like it. I found it a bit boring. But the technique that I used, I found it really beneficial, and hopefully it'll be good for you guys as well. So there are two types of reading in verbal reasoning. So this is the way that I like to think about it. There are basically two types of reading. You can either skim something, so that means you're going to read it super quick, and you're just going to get a very quick overview of what's happening. So you can read through all this text right now, and if you skim through, you can say, okay, understand the first 1 to 2, understanding reading, skimming up, map where locations are, yeah? You can either go through it super quickly, or you can go through it nice and slowly and understand. And this is kind of what puts it into your short-term memory. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be remembering the UCAT texts beyond when you leave your UCAT room, right? So when you do understanding sort of reading, it means you're going to read it and you're going to understand it. And I'm going to go through an example of how this works in a minute. But the way that you should do this is, and the way that worked the best for me, is for the first 1 to 2 sentences of your verbal reasoning chapter. So just for context, you'll have a few chapters, right? And you just need to read through them, and then you'll answer some questions on them on the right hand side. But the first 1 to 2 sentences, you're going to read them with a super understanding intention. So you want to understand everything they say, you want to remember everything they say in the short term, and generally the first 1 to 2 sentences, they kind of set the scene for what the entire paragraph is going to be about. So if you can understand those first 1 to 2 sentences, you'll be able to understand generally what the rest of the paragraph is about, yeah? So do that for all of them. You read the first 1 to 2. Obviously you do this one first, then this one, yeah? Don't do it in a weird order, because that'd be strange. Once you've read the first 1 to 2, what do you do with the rest of them? You're going to skim through these ones. So if I'm going to draw a bit more of a detailed view up here, but let's say these are the lines of a chapter, right? For the first 2 sentences, you're going to read them in an understanding way. You want to remember everything they say, you want to understand everything they say, and you want to get it into your short-term memory. For the rest of it, because you've read the first 1 to 2 sentences, you basically know already what this paragraph is going to be about. So because you know already what the paragraph's about, you can kind of guess what's coming next. So through this, you can quickly skim read it, you can have a look where any key dates are, any keywords, any key artifacts that are mentioned inside of it, and what this helps you to do is, this helps you to map out this chapter, or this paragraph. So if the question says, what happened in 1947, you can think to yourself, oh yeah, I skimmed through this paragraph before, and the number 1947 was mentioned. You know exactly where to go, and it means that when you're looking for information, you'll be a lot faster when you come back to it. So, just to reconcile what I just said, the first 1 to 2 sentences, or the first 10-20% of the paragraph, you read it with the intention to understand and to remember it in your short term. The rest of the paragraph, you skim it, you quickly read over it, and it means that you have a general understanding of where each sort of date or where each figure is mentioned in that paragraph. And then when you come to the questions, if it asks you, okay, is this true or false, you can jump over to that paragraph straight away, and you remember, oh yeah, I know it was mentioned over here, or I know this was mentioned down here. So it saves you a lot of time, because you don't have to come back to the entire text and think, okay, where's it mentioned? Let me skim through it again. If you skim through it as you initially read it, then you don't have to skim it later, yeah? So that's why it saves a lot of time, and it helps you with those true or false questions really well. So yeah, first 1 to 2 sentences, you understand them, the rest of them you're just going to skim. Understanding reading allows you to know what it's about, and yeah, skimming lets you know the data points, locations. And generally, this is the same sort of thing that our English teachers taught us, right? When you have a paragraph, you have an opening sentence or two, and they set the tone for the paragraph, and they let you know what it's going to be about. The same thing applies here in any piece of literature or any sort of artifact that you're reading. So yeah, that's the technique that I used. If you got any questions, remember, you can put them into the chat. So if you haven't seen the chat already, you go on this general VC and you press open chat and it'll take you over. Alright, so that's verbal reasoning, and I'm going to show you an example now. So this is an example that I pulled from the official UCAT database, and it's a few paragraphs long. But the technique that I just talked about, let's try and apply it. So we read the first sentence. Rope is made from fibers of material which are twisted together to make yarn, which is then twisted together into strands. Okay, I've got that understood. In the more common laid rope, the strands are then twisted again in the same direction to form the rope itself. Okay, now I know what this paragraph is about. It's about rope, it's about yarn, it's about strands and laid. And generally whatever comes next in this paragraph is going to be building on what was already said. So I can quickly skim through it. Number of twists can change, it can weaken the rope, laid rope has a tendency to untwist. Done. Okay? You see how quickly we can read through things and process that information. I know exactly what this paragraph is about, I know where every single thing is, and I know how to come back to it in the future. Oh, am I speaking too fast? Sorry. I'm a northerner, so that's probably why. I'll slow down a little bit. But yeah, you've now read the start of it, and you understand what's going to follow. And because you know what's going to follow, you can come back to it later on, and it'll be really easy to find it out. Yeah? So then let's go to the next paragraph. In braided rope, 8 or more strands are woven or plaited together, okay, and it forms a cylinder. So straight away you know this paragraph is about braided rope. Then you go on to read the rest of it, okay, it's just an example of a double braid, la da 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 da, no one cares. Finally, with these paragraphs, you do the same thing. You read the start of it, rope can be made of various materials, and just from that one sentence, you can get an idea of what this paragraph is going to be about. It says rope can be made of various materials, so the likelihood is this paragraph is going to talk about the various materials. And then what do you know? It does. Natural fibers, hemp, sisal, manila. You don't need to remember these. You just need to know this paragraph talks about rope materials. And then if you have any question that asks you about rope materials, you can just come back to it and you know this is the paragraph, this is exactly where it talked about rope materials, this is where I need to be looking for information. And with the technique that I told you as well, it also offers you a little bit of an advantage as well, because if you read the first bit, nylon rope is strong and has a lot of stretch, which is useful to give, and then you skim through the rest of it. If you get a question on something about give, you say, you know, which rope has this quality or something like that, then you know, from your understanding reading and from the fact that it's in your short-term memory, you just jump right over to nylon rope. You can either skim it or you've just remembered it, yeah? There are two ways that it can work. I'm just going to check my pings real quick. I've been pinged in general twice. Okay, yeah, nothing important. Back to this. So yeah, that's an example of how you can implement the technique that I used. Obviously, everyone's got different things that work for you, but for me, I tried so many different ones online. Like, there's so many websites out there, and they all said do this, do that. So I tried to use all the different techniques that I saw, but this is the one that essentially worked for me, and the one that I naturally tended towards. So try different things out, but for me, this is what worked the best, and I'd recommend it to you too, because it doesn't seem like anything that's, you know, specific to the way your mind works or specific to something else. Try and use this technique. So yeah, it allows you to map out the whole text, like I said, because you end up memorizing where those key dates are, what each paragraph talks about, and in your head you know that paragraph 1 it talks about this, paragraph 2 it talks about this, paragraph 3 it talks about this, and that means it's really easy to come back to the text later on. So instead of you having to think, oh my god, where did it mention that key term, you read every single paragraph again, which is a waste of time. You already know where those key terms are, and you already know how to come back to them later on, so you do that. And it allows it to, so it puts it into your short-term memory, and it means you can save time later on. With verbal reasoning though, don't practice it too much, because of course, you know, no one really likes English that much, so it's really easy to get burnt out. It is arguably the most boring section that there is, so if you just keep doing this again and again and again, you are going to get bored, you are going to get tired of it, and it will affect your performance in other sections as well. So, you know, if you're going to do one day focused on verbal reasoning, I wouldn't recommend doing more than 2 verbal reasoning mocks. You know what I mean? Don't go overboard, don't do too many, because you're going to tire yourself out. This is the section that people score the lowest on. This is the section that people don't like that much. This is the section that will very easily make you tired and burn you out. Yeah? So don't overdo it. Remember that when you are reading something, yeah, this is something that for me, I'm going to highlight it as well. Do I have the budget for that? Yes, I do. This for me was like a game changer when you're thinking about verbal reasoning. So instead of going into it thinking, yeah, it's going to be some boring ass text, I'm not going to be bothered with it, and I'm going to score the lowest in this section, change your mindset and think to yourself, I'm going to read about a new topic. It might be a bit interesting, it might not, but I'm just going to go through it, I'm going to learn some statistics, and I'm going to move on. Verbal reasoning in that sense is unique. It's the only section that actually improves you as a person, because you might actually find an interest in one of the paragraphs and think, yeah, you know what, that's pretty interesting. So you might actually want to read it, you know what I mean? The other ones, you're not going to be interested in maths, you're not going to be interested in random statistics, you're not going to be interested in random facts. Verbal reasoning is unique in that sense. So play that to your advantage. Think to yourself, this is an interesting topic, I'm going to read through it, and I'm going to answer these questions in the best that I can. And for me, there was some topics that I just hated. Like if I saw biology or chemistry, I genuinely found them interesting, and I'd read through them. But with things like history, they were so boring. Like in 1932, France invaded Poland or something like that. I'm not bothered. I don't care. So for me, they were a lot harder, and you can just flag them and skip them and come back to them later. And this is just one tip generally for your UCAT. Try and triage, yeah? So there's going to be so many questions on there that you're good at, and there's going to be so many questions on there that you're not as good at, or that you don't want to do as much. Make sure you prioritize the ones that you are good at. That is one of the big things of the UCAT. Make sure you play to your own advantages. Yeah, you're all sitting the same test, but everyone's got different strengths and different weaknesses, so make sure you play towards them. Yeah, triaging is really good, and it's really important as well in this next section, quantitative reasoning, and I'll talk to you about it in a second. But generally for the UCAT, prioritize your strengths. Triaging is basically like if you've got 20 questions, right, and you're good at 15 of them, do those 15 first and then do the 5 hard ones. Don't just stay stuck on the hard ones because they appeared first. Triaging is playing to your strengths, yeah? And it's the same thing that happens in like A&E. When they've got 30 patients, the one that's dying needs to be seen before the one that says they've got just a little headache. You know what I mean? They see the ones that need the most attention first. So, if there's a topic you hate, just skip it and come back to it later on, yeah? The 2 question types in verbal reasoning are, is this statement true or false, or you can't tell? Or it tells you in what year did this happen, or generally a basic comprehension question where it's like it gives you a little bit of information, it wants to ask you a question based on text. Yeah? Okay, searching for keywords, as I mentioned before, it only works with some true or false questions, so don't rely on this technique as much as people tell you to. So many of my friends were like, oh yeah, I'm going to go through the verbal reasoning questions, and I'm going to do all the true or false ones first. I'm like, why would you do that? This true or false technique of just scanning through the text and hoping that you find a word, saying inshallah you'll find the word, it doesn't work every time. All the texts are different and you can't predict what's going to happen, yeah? So, in that sense, don't just do this scanning technique and say, oh yeah, I'll find the word. It's not the best way to go forward. You need to try and understand the text, apply your knowledge that you learn, and apply the skills that you've already got. That's the balance that you need to maintain in verbal reasoning. Okay, so I hope that technique's good. Try it out, and if it doesn't work, you can try something else. But I'm hoping that it does work because it is pretty foolproof, and for me, it's the best one there. Alright, I'm just gonna have a sip of water, but next technique or next section to talk about is quantitative reasoning. Now, for those of you who don't do maths A level or haven't done maths in a few years since GCSE or whatever, a lot of you might be scared and think, oh my gosh, I hated maths, I'm not that good at it. But this is only GCSE level maths. And when I say GCSE level, I mean it's like the stuff you do in year 9. It's so basic. You're not going to see any trigonometry, you're not going to see anything that's difficult. The questions mostly are comprised of adding numbers up, subtracting them, finding differences, finding percentages, all that sort of stuff. And I'll talk through some specific examples afterwards of things that always tend to show up, but it's fine. So don't worry about it if you don't do A-level maths. This is the section that statistically people score the highest on, so try and stat pad this section as hard as you can, because honestly it is a really good section just to get easy marks on. So yeah, easy sections to pick up marks on, don't miss out. And remember, once you've done one section, that score does not affect your performance in the next section. You get a 1 minute break, I think, or if you've got extra time, then I think you get 5 minutes. You sit down and you just think to yourself, okay, you take some deep breaths and you think, yeah, that section's happened, it went good or it went bad, but now I'm going to focus on the next one. I'm not going to get bogged down by my previous bad performance. I'm not going to get overconfident after my previous good performance. You just focus on one section at a time. Well, yes, Ned, if you saw my TikTok, you'll see my voice and my face. Yeah. The biggest tip for this section is, yeah, if you are good at maths, you're probably going to think to yourself, I'm going to do all these questions, I'm going to rinse them all, and I'm going to get 100%. Yeah? The biggest tip for this section is to let go of your ego, because I had this ego as well. I said, I'm doing A-level maths. I've done all of A-level maths already. It's calm. I'm going to go through this and I'm going to speed through it and do every single question. That was the wrong mindset to have completely. What you need to do is triage. So I mentioned it before, but I'm going to go into a bit more detail now. In verbal and quantitative reasoning, you've got a different number of questions, and what some of them will be hard, some of them will be easy. And when I say hard, I don't mean like, oh, this maths is hard. It's just long. Because an example of one question that I remember doing is it gives you the performance of a company in a table and it tells you the profit, and it's like 2018, 2019, and it asks you to calculate the percentage difference from 2018 to 2019 of company A, and it asks you to calculate the percentage difference of company B. And you know, one percentage difference, two, and then calculating the difference between them. That's a lot of work. And the thing is, one question on QR is one question. So why would you waste your time working through this like a slave when you can just go and do some easy question that says add two numbers up? You know what I mean? That's what you need to do in this section. Let go of the fact that you know how to do it and think to yourself, I need to do the easiest questions possible and stack pad it out. Because that's what I did. I didn't answer all my questions in my QR in the actual thing, but I still got 900 because the thing is, I just went through the easy questions first. So yeah, let go of your ego, do the easiest questions first, and it will help you a lot, yeah? Don't worry about doing all the questions, just do the easy ones. Why would you waste your time on the harder ones, you know what I mean? It's basic common sense, don't overwork yourself. Do the easier questions first, because they're going to get you roughly the same number of marks as the harder ones, and that's what I did. I think when I did the QR section, there were 36 questions. I'm pretty sure in my actual thing, I only did 31, but I still ended up getting a score of 900 because I left those 5 hard ones to the end, and I got all 31 of these right, or I got a decent amount of them right. So it definitely works, and it changed the way that I did QR. Yeah, you can get 900 without doing all of them. Yeah, you can. Because I mean, to be fair, at the end, these ones, I guessed them, a bit of them. So I think maybe I just got lucky in guessing them. But yeah, I don't think you actually need to do every single question to get 100%, to get 900. When you think about the score distribution of QR, then it's not like you have to get 36 out of 36 for it to be equal to 900, because the scores are kind of skewed like a binomial distribution. So it's kind of like this. There's not really a lot of people getting 35s and 36s, 34s and 33s. So at this point, they just say anyone getting this score is basically at the top. So they just put everyone here to get 900 plus. So you don't need to get 100% to be able to get 900, depending on how your cohort's doing, yeah? Because if you said 36 out of 36 is 900, that basically means every single person who gets 900 got 4 marks, but you know that's not the case, because getting 36 out of 36 in QR is a really big and difficult thing to do. So, yeah. Let's move on a little bit now. Some questions are longer and data-based, so just skip them if you don't want to do them, yeah, and come back later. Make sure to guess. I'll change that afterwards, but you know what it means. Never ever leave a question out. Just guess it, The chance is you might get it right and it might boost your score by 10 or 20 points or even more. So always guess. Don't leave any questions behind. You can do them. And yeah, if you see a question in QR, a lot of them are like information text, 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 and then a massive box of data. These are really long, to be honest. You don't need to actually read through all of this text. Just skip straight onto that data, read through the main parts of this, and just skip straight onto that data because it's a lot easier. When you're practicing, use the calculator with the number pad. So yeah, when you practice, this is a general tip that I forgot to include on the actual thing, but let's say you've got your computer. Yeah, that's your computer. This is your keyboard. Make sure you're using an actual keyboard. Don't use your laptop's keyboard, or don't use just some random Bluetooth one. Make sure you're using a full-size keyboard, because that's how you can get it the most accurate to how it's going to be in the exam. So buy a full-size keyboard. They're like £5 or £6 on Amazon. You can get some really basic ones. You don't need to go for an expensive one, because in the real thing you're going to have basic ones. And you're going to have this at the side. It's called the number pad, and you've got plus, minus, divide, times, and you've got your numbers here. This is so much quicker and faster to use than using the numbers at the top of your keyboard. So make sure you use this. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, shut up, man. There we go. Okay, there we go. if you have a number pad on your laptop keyboard, then that's fine, but I'd recommend you just try and buy one that's a full-size keyboard, just to make sure you've got 100% accuracy in terms of when you do your UCAT and when you actually do it at home. Like, I got one for £6 or something. It was so basic, I never used it again, but when I sat my actual UCAT, I felt really accustomed, and it felt, I'm just doing a mock. It's not a big thing, because I've did it before. It's £5 or £6, and if not, your school library it's quite an appealing place to try and find them. So if there are some crusty computers that don't get used, just steal one from there. You know what I mean? But I don't endorse that. Anyway, you do that, and make sure also you use a mouse as well. Just because that's the way you navigate the actual questions in the exam. Make sure you use a mouse. Don't use a trackpad if you're using a laptop, because it's too different. But in terms of navigation itself, there are so many different shortcuts that you can use. I haven't included them here, but generally what you can say is Alt plus N takes you to the next question, and it's so much better than going to the bottom with your mouse and clicking next. And yeah, you can do that. Alt plus C brings up your calculator, and there's a bunch of other things. So yeah, it is, honestly, you need to learn these shortcuts, because individually you think, yeah, okay, it's not that much time, but when you're doing 36 QR questions, 44 VR ones, it does add up. So try and use these shortcuts. I haven't put them on here, but they're super easy. Just Google UCAT shortcuts and use the ones that you want to. Yeah, and then there's also, in the UCAT, you're given a whiteboard. So you have your actual computer, and you've also got a little whiteboard. In your actual exam, when you're doing it, the whiteboard's kind of weird. So it's not like a whiteboard. Once you write something on it, it's permanently there. So in that sense, it's like paper. But there's like 20 sheets, so you're not going to run out. It's laminated paper, yeah. But in your actual practice, you can just use pen and paper. For me, I wasn't even bothered doing that. I use my tablet and my pen. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, something to get your thoughts down on is something to get your thoughts down on. So yeah, write down everything on your whiteboard, to be honest, because if you're thinking to yourself, okay, I've got 300, and then I need to add on 150, and then I need to times that by 750 or something like that, just write it down. There's no point in you remembering it in your head. You're just putting unnecessary pressure on yourself. Just write it down on your whiteboard or your laminated paper, whatever you want to call it, and it will actually save you so much brain power instead of having to remember loads of random numbers. The question information will give you a lot of BS. That I mentioned this before, when they give you long question stems, you can just skip through them. They often have random numbers in them that are completely irrelevant to your calculations. Again, just skip through them. The main things you need to see are the headings and the data titles. So the data titles are, number of customers, and this is company A or company B or something like that. Just make sure you see them and you know what you're looking at. So if this is like number of sales, then just know exactly what you're looking at and know exactly what each database is. It doesn't matter if it says in 1947 this was an interesting year for this company, their growth increased after a campaign. It doesn't matter. Just go straight to the numbers, because I can guarantee you this will not be relevant in your actual answers. And one thing that is pretty cool as well is, you get multiple choice answers, A, B, C, D. If you've got the answer that's like 5, 500, 10 million, and then 0.2, these are all really different in terms of the scale, right? 0.2 is tiny compared to 5, 500 is tiny compared to 10,000, and you get what I'm saying. So what you can roughly do is, you can just think to yourself, if it says, I want you to do this long calculation, just roughly do it on your calculator. So 3,217 just becomes 3,200, and 197.63 just becomes 200, yeah? Just roughly do it, and you will get a number that is in the ballpark of one of these. So if you get like 9,900, you know the answer is 10,000. If you get an answer of 4.8, you know the answer is 5. You don't need to put in these full numbers. Just quickly do it, because it's so much faster, I guarantee you, to just do 3, 2, 0, 0. You just tap 0 twice, instead of 3, 2, look for number 1, look for number 7. It's a short amount of time, but it could be crucial for your exam, okay? So whatever sort of time-saving technique there is, I would recommend that you use it, purely because it could be the difference between one university and another. So yeah, take a look at those answers. They give you a sort of ballpark figure of what you're looking for. And one example that I saw coming up again and again was tax. So with tax, I didn't know how to do it before actually doing the UCAT, but in preparation for the UCAT, I learned how to do it. Essentially, if you're earning like 70,000 a year, let's say, your first 20,000 is tax-free or something like that, up to 50,000. So this amount between 20,000 and 50,000, you're going to be taxed at like 12% or something, and then after that it's higher and higher. This is a really poor explanation right now because I just want to give you a general overview of how tax works, but it's a specific example that I'd recommend you look into. Don't look into it on like a government website or something. Look into it in terms of the context of UCAT past paper questions. But yeah, they're fine. I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but it's just I've been reminded by mentioning the word paper. Please, for the love of God, do not buy any books. You should not get them. Back in the day, they were fine, yeah, because there wasn't an alternative. But now you've got platforms like Medify and MedEntry that literally replicate your UCAT in a one-to-one way. Do not buy the books. They're too hard. They've not been updated, and they're not actually giving you the feel of doing the UCAT. So there's no point in doing that at all, yeah. And I remember because my sister and brother, they both did the UCAT, right? And they had that book, 1,250 questions for the UCAT, and they gave it me and said, "Yo, start working through this." But after I looked at it, I'm like, this is so hard. Why am I going to do this for? And it wasn't actually accurate to the real thing because, you know, the book was a bit old, the UCAT had changed a bit by then, and yeah. So make sure you get Medify or MedEntry, like Sned said, yeah. Don't spend any money on UCAT Prep except for Medify, the other one, yeah. We'll talk about resources at the end. Me and Toma have been working actually on making sort of a space of all the resources that we used for our med school applications, and that's now actually been developed, so we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And we've got some other people, like some influencers like Med with Mo and stuff like that. They've put some stuff on there as well, so it's pretty cool. But yeah, we'll talk to you a bit about that at the end. The next section, abstract reasoning. This is either people's favourites or it's their second most hated after verbal reasoning. I'm going to take a sip of water and then we'll get into it. Okay. Abstract reasoning, you're going to see quite a few different techniques on how to do abstract reasoning. Some people use like acronyms like SPANs, shape, position, angles, number, solid. I don't know what it stands for. Some people just say Bismillah and do it. But honestly, the way I'm going to talk to you about it now is what I think is the best way to try and do it. It's a way that allows you to actually have an understanding of what's going on and have a structured way to doing things, but it also allows you to actually not be so restricted by these acronyms and be able to apply your own knowledge. Okay, so there are only so many types of patterns that can appear. That's what you need to remember. Like, there can only be so many types of patterns that can appear, and I'm not going to say try and remember all of them because there's way too many to learn, but what you can try and do is develop categories for which these patterns are. So for example, if you have set A and set B, this is an example of a UCAT question, and you have a bunch of boxes giving you examples of things in those sets. Depending on what's in those boxes, there's only a certain number or a general idea of what can actually be in there. So, for example, if you have set A with lines and set B has also got lines, right? So set A has got lines like this, and set B has got lines like this. Okay, this is a really bad example because I'm just drawing it like right now. But when you see something like lines, you should think to yourself, there's only a certain number of things that can come up. And from my past knowledge, I know that lines have intersections, there's number of lines, there's number of right angles, there's only a few things that can come up. So when you see lines, you should think to yourself, okay, the category of this question is lines. So what I've seen before is intersections, right angles, and numbers. And try them out. And using the knowledge that you've seen in the past and the skills that you've developed in the past of finding patterns, you can use those same skills then in the actual exam if you see a new pattern. But generally, abstract reasoning, it feels a lot easier than MedEntry, a little bit harder than Medify, but I'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, you're basically categorizing what patterns you've seen before and thinking what could they have changed in the real thing to make what I'm seeing in front of me. So does that make sense? Because I know it's a bit of a wishy-washy explanation, but just to summarize, all patterns can be sort of put into the different categories. So they can be shapes, they can be lines, they can be shading, and there's obviously more, but generally those are the ones that you're going to see again and again and again. And based on this, with shapes, you can have number of shapes, you can have number of sides, you can have number that are shaded. There's only a few things that they can realistically ask you. So using this categorical system, you can think to yourself, okay, the category of this question is shapes. And from my past knowledge, I know that shapes can either do this, this, or this. Yeah? So that's how essentially it works. You split things off into categories and try and use your knowledge from the past to do it. So that's the technique that I use for abstract reasoning. And what I liked about this technique is that it has a structured way of doing things, but it's also allowing you to think freely and think about new things on the spot. And it's not constricted like acronyms like these ones are. And something that I did as well is I made a Word document of all the different patterns that I saw that were kind of weird, and it meant that in the future I didn't actually have to feel like I was looking at a new pattern when I saw them, because I made a Word document with all the patterns that I'd seen in the past that were weird, and then I went over them every now and then just to think about it. Toma, are we allowed to like put these links, these codes in or whatever? The one that KW's put in? Or yeah. I'm not sure if that's allowed, because I think he benefits from it as well, right? Purely because you're going to benefit from it yourself, we don't really allow links like that on the server. Do you still have... Yeah, if you want to ask him on DM. I'm going to talk about that, how to get MedEntry and Medify cheaper in a bit anyway, but yeah. Do I still have the Word document? No, I'm pretty sure I deleted it, to be honest. I'm sorry. It was on my old laptop. But to be honest, the best thing is just try and make your own one, because everyone's going to have patterns that are different. Like the patterns that I see and don't get straight away are going to be different to the ones that you see and don't get straight away. You know what I mean? So there's no point using someone else's. Make one that's individual to you. And yeah, I'll just say that again, for any sort of UCAT prep, everyone's going to have different techniques, everyone's going to think of the sections differently, everyone's going to have different opinions, but at the end of the day, individualize your prep to you, and don't just copy someone else because you think they're smart. Their technique could be rubbish for you, or it could be amazing for them. Yeah? So don't just blindly use people's techniques. Test and try stuff before you actually go and use it in the real thing. But yeah, there's that sort of idea of doing things. And in these questions as well, there's always going to be distractions. So they might put some circles in there as well, just for no reason, that have no relevance whatsoever. But if you see a pattern, then just stick with it. Don't be and you think that something else isn't fitting with your pattern, or you can't find one. The likelihood is it's a distraction. So as long as you get one pattern, to be honest, most of the time it's fine. Some actual questions have two patterns, but you're still going to be able to get 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5, maybe even 5 out of 5 if you identify one. So don't worry too much about distractions. And I think this might have changed a little bit by now, if the question timing has changed, but for me, I received around 70 seconds per set. So in terms of the questions, there were 55 or 50 of them, I think, and in terms of the timing, you had 70 seconds per set, because when you get these questions in the UCAT, you get set A and set B, but you're not just going to have one question on them, you'll have 4 or 5 questions on this set. So yeah, if we're blind guessing, should we guess the same option every time? To be honest, don't blind guess. Try and have an educated guess. Like, just think to yourself, okay, I know it's something to do with this, and that it can't be that one straight away. You know what I mean? But if you want to do the same option every time, go for the same option every time. I don't think statistically there's any sort of, I think C comes up the most or something. I don't know. Someone told me that. I think in my BMAT, what I did was the last 7 questions I was stuck, so I just put C for all of them. But yeah, it's up to you how you want to guess. There's no way of saying guessing. There's no way of saying, oh yeah, this technique for guessing works better than this one. But yeah, it's just random. But yeah, try and educate your guesses if you can. And when you're looking for a pattern, start with the simplest box as well. So for example, with these ones here, you can see that some boxes have got more lines, some boxes have got more circles. Just look at the one that's the simplest, because this box will have the least going on and it will still be showing that pattern. So it allows you to identify the pattern really easily. So look at the simplest box first. And yeah, complete the series. They're usually pretty calm, but don't worry if they're hard. Usually complete the series, it's just something like, it's got a couple of boxes, and you can just look at one thing and think, how is it changing? So here it goes to the right, here it goes down, here it goes left, and then once you look at one of them and you think, okay, it's like, what's the next one? You can just look at your previous ones and think, okay, that dot's got to be in the top left corner, and you've got 4 options. 2 of them don't even have the dot in the left corner, so you can rule them out immediately. So for these ones, just break them down, because there's usually a few things going on, and just do it one by one, and then that will allow you to be the best that you can be, essentially. And then decision making. This is a section that sort of combines a little bit of quantitative reasoning with a little bit of verbal reasoning and a little bit more. Now, generally this is a section that I felt kind of neutral on. I didn't really have a liking towards it or a disliking towards it. But decision making, again, it's coming back to what I said before within verbal reasoning, abstract reasoning, and quantitative. It's just about time management. How different is UCAT and UCAT ANZ? I think the UCAT exam itself is the same, but with UCAT Australia and New Zealand, because people there, they spend like 1.5, 2 years prepping for it or something, or they spend a really long time prepping for it, whereas we only do 6 to 8 weeks. So their boundaries themselves are higher. But in terms of the prep, it's the same. Like I remember I attended, what's that guy, Dr. Ray, the one who made MedEntry. He's Australian, and his resources were catered to Australians, but I attended his UCAT course and it was still fine for UK stuff. The exam itself is the same, it's just the performance in each country that varies. So you can just use anything, yeah? Use the UK stuff, use the US stuff, use the AUS stuff, it doesn't make a difference. No, the sections are all the same, the questions are all the same, the numbers, it's the same thing. Exact same thing. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, the sections are the same, the question numbers, maybe that might vary or something. How to get 600, I already went through that before, but I'm going to post a recording afterwards, so don't worry. Okay, triaging and decision making is important too. So there's going to be quite a few different questions. Some of them you're maybe not as good at. Maybe you don't like Venn diagrams. Maybe you don't like syllogisms. Whatever your cup of tea is not, you're going to skip them and just not do them. You know what I mean? So just don't bother doing the questions that are more difficult because you're going to be wasting your time. Okay. Okay, so with syllogisms, these are 2-mark questions, and they're the ones that say like all sands are bands, some bands are tans. Okay, this is a really generic example I've made up, and for me the way that I found the best to do these was visualization. So we're going to first of all cut this down to S, this is going to be cut down to B, this is going to be cut down to T. So we know that all sands are bands. So what I did was with this, I would write the letter S, I'd do an arrow to say B. So all sands are bands. But then it said some bands are tans. So when it said some, I would do a dashed arrow like this. So then it allows you to get a really, really cool visual representation of everything. And for me, this was way better than having some verbal representation because it was a lot harder to understand verbally. So by visually making this, I found this really useful when I was doing syllogisms because it gives you straight away, you can see the relationship between T and S, T and B, and S and V, you know what I mean? You can see everything really clearly and really quickly. So that's what I did for syllogisms. I'm not sure about any other techniques because I just randomly tried that myself, and honestly, that was really good for me. So I just went and used that throughout my entire UCAT. Yeah, use that technique for syllogisms. Be aware of these words as well. Yeah, I remember once I was super annoyed because I got one of the words wrong in the question. I misinterpreted the meaning of it because it said that most something is something. You just need to know that most means like quite a lot of them or more than half. Like it seems really easy to say, but just in the UCAT, don't forget these basic words. Most means that there's more than half. Some means that there's a few, and all of them means every single one of them. So sometimes they try and trick you up in the actual thing, and they say, is the chance of this being this certain? And because it said all, then you know that it is, yeah? So just make sure you're aware of those words. Some questions are 2 markers in DM, some of them are 1 markers. You don't need to worry about the marks themselves, just try and do the best that you can. And statistic questions, this is another type of question. It tells you like TVs from brand A have a life of 5,000 hours and take 150 watts to power. TVs from brand B have a life of 5,500 hours and take a power of 130 watts. Which TV is better? And what I've done right here is exactly what you need to do. Just draw yourself a mini little table in the exam and write both the statistics side by side, and it allows you to compare them super easily. This one's higher, bam, that's better. This one's lower, bam, that's better. Yeah? And it'll tell you which one you need to go for, but they usually give you quite a lot of context, but all you need is a number, and then you just compare it to the number in the next one. You know what I mean? So don't bother wasting your time on that. I've said this so many times now, my mouth is becoming dry, but don't bother wasting your time. There are so many easy things for you to do, and there's so many ways for you to cut down the amount of time that you spend, so just do them. Right, now, we're going to talk about the last section, and this is SJT. It doesn't contribute to your numerical score, so you'll get a score in the UCAT, and it'll look something like this. You get a numerical score, and that's from the first 4 sections that I talked about, and then you get this score, which is a band, and that's what your SJT is responsible for. So this is the section that you don't really need to have any math skills for, any verbal skills for. This is the section where you just need to think about putting yourself in a situation and think about the response that you would do. So in that sense, it is a lot easier than the rest of them because it doesn't require as much sort of practice. It more requires learning. So it is a bit of a chunky section because there are quite a lot of questions, but to be honest, it's a nice way to cool down after your UCAT is finished. So this is just as important, of course, but it's a good way to cool down. There is some theory to understand in this section, and if you want to, you can read through the GMC guidelines. It's like 30 or 40 pages long, so I didn't bother, but I'm going to summarize everything that it says here, basically. But you can read through it and you'll go to the SJT, hopefully. But I took a note of the recurring themes in my own practice, and I'm going to talk you through all of them now. So the key skills that you always have to show in an SJT example are communication, trust, knowledge, patient safety, and consent. These are some really core values in the NHS as a doctor that you'll always need to show. And whenever you have an SJT scenario, you should always aspire to tick each and every single one of these off. And something else to know about is consent. So sometimes it gives you an example saying a patient is drunk or whatever, and you're asking them and they need some vital surgery after a car crash. They're saying yes, or they're saying no, that kind of thing. You need to understand that consent is not valid if this person is drunk or drugged or under the influence of anything else. So ensure that you know about consent and how important it is within medicine, because you can't do anything without consent. Empathize with every single person in the scenario. So when you have a scenario, it could be something like a nurse is telling you this, you're here, this is me. A patient is telling you this, a consultant is telling you this, and you should aim to try and please every single one of these that you can. I don't know why he's got 3 eyes, we'll make that into a nose. But yeah, you should try and aim to please every single one of these people so that that's the best scenario possible. The best scenario possible is always the one that helps the most people. And you know, if it's maybe and always ensure that you're also trying to make yourself happy as well. So try and do something that not only makes the doctor better or reduces their stress or alleviates some pain, but also try and ensure that everyone else is happy too. And in terms of the hierarchy of, you know, if you have to pick one or the other, it's always patient comes first and then it's yourself, unfortunately. But yeah, that's the way it goes. Patient safety, always number one. If you're ever struggling in a question, just think to yourself, how can I ensure patient safety here? Because that's the number one thing to always remember. So empathize with everyone, bring about minimal disruption, but think about yourself as well. Look for a conclusion that makes everyone happy, but especially whoever raised the issue. So if the nurse is the one that said to you, oh, this patient is acting in a bad way, then try and please this nurse as well, because at the end of the day, she is the one who raised that issue, or he, or they, or whatever. Remember the 4 pillars of medical ethics. If you haven't learned them yet, honestly, it's not deep. It's just autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. You can Google them afterwards, but they're just 4 words that essentially outline how you should think about medical scenarios, and you should always try and apply them in every scenario possible, especially in SJT. Solve problems at a lower level first. So what I'm saying here is, let's say you see you're a medical student and you're on a placement. You've got another medical student with you, and your medical student friend comes in drunk. What do? And what this is saying is, instead of just reporting them to the dean of the medical school straight away, you should always speak to them first, and then speak to a local manager, or maybe speak to a local ward manager, and then you should slowly escalate things, yeah? Increase the level of response. Don't ever just jump in and tell the highest person in authority straight away, because at the end of the day, if that was you who came in drunk, you wouldn't want the person of highest authority to know straight away. You'd want it to be localized first before other people found out, because if you can localize it and sort it out, then that would be better than taking it to the top straight away. So always do the lowest level of power first. And don't ever lie, that's bad. Don't be biased, always show empathy, always be respectful, don't break the guidelines. The GMC guidelines, to be honest, if you're not bothered reading them, they're just like common sense, to be honest. Like communication, skills, work as a team, all that sort of stuff. They're just basically common sense. So just be a good person. Respect, communication, I'll just try a few of the values, teamwork. Yeah, basic sort of things. Just have a little brief read over them. And make sure you always own up for mistakes as well. A patient has a right to know if you've made a mistake on them or anything like that. And yeah, this stuff as well, you don't need to think about interviews yet. Do not think about interviews yet until your UCAT is done and you've received interviews. But this is quite good prep for interviews because a lot of ethical scenarios will be using these skills. So don't think that this is, going in vain or you're going to forget it or anything like that. And in terms of the different question types that you've got things like how important is this to think about in a scenario. So maybe it's something like you're running late already, you've got a family dinner tonight, but the nurse has asked you to stay behind and look after a patient. How important is the fact that you have a family dinner tonight? And you get some options: very, very important, important, not important, and not important at all. Okay? But as you go through these questions, you will get better, you will get more experience with them. And generally, I started off at like band 3 in terms of this, band 3 or 4 when I did my first mock, when the real thing I got band 1. Because just generally over time, you will get better with these questions. The more scenarios that you're exposed to, the more prep that you do, you will get better. And yeah, this subsection, when you work through it and you have a look at your answers, don't just look at your answers and think, okay, that's right, that's wrong. Move on to the next question, move on to the next mock. Look through every single one of your questions and reflect upon why you got it right or why you got it wrong. And don't be lazy. Don't look at the questions you got right and think, yeah, I know it. Because that could have been a question that you just skipped and you guessed, or it could be a question that you were thinking about wrongly. Okay, so every question SJT, look through it, take a look at the mark scheme, take a look at what the thought process is behind someone else who got that question right. Okay, because eventually the more you look at the correct thing, the more you'll be able to develop the correct thing without any help. And yeah, these are just some rules that I saw quite a few of. You can't prescribe as a medical student. You should report stuff locally before I said. Don't allow drugs. The patient always comes first, and consider options independently. These are just some things that I saw quite a lot of, and a few of my friends saw quite a lot of, so make sure you try and remember that. Okay, now, you've got the details on how to prep for your UCAT, yeah? You can always come back to this if you want to. You got the techniques, but how do you know what resources to use? So myself, Toma, Med with Mo, and a bunch of other medics and sort of Instagrammers and TikTokers and influencers who are studying medicine, we've all curated the resources that we used on a platform known as Questa.io. So I don't know if you've heard of it before. What we've done is we've put all of our resources that we used onto Questa, and I'll just show it you now really quickly. This is Questa.io. Once it loads up, you've got a bunch of different ins on the left hand side, and you can have a look at this one here. This is the applying to medicine in, and you've got a bunch of different sections for every single step of the way of your medical application. So if you have a look at entrance exams, which is this, you can take a look at UCAT, and you can see that Toma, myself, Med with Mo, Abdullah, and some other people, we've all gone and put down what we think are the best resources for this. And you can see that I've put a few comments on what you need to remember with this resource and some other stuff as well. So think about make sure I'll put this in the chat now very quickly. There is the link. These are the resources that we used, and these are the resources that we recommend. There's a course there as well. There are some other courses. If we've not put it there, then it means we're not recommending it. Maybe you can tell us about it. And yeah, if you think there's a resource that you like, then you can say suggest a resource, and you can suggest it yourself. Yeah. But I won't talk too much about Questa. This is a really good place to find out. Yeah. It's not in order of how good they are. It's just generally in order of what's up. But yeah, in terms of what's going on, in terms of what's the best resource, I would recommend MedEntry over Medify. I use MedEntry and Medify myself, and these are the top two platforms everyone uses. You can get an amazing score with both. That's what I'm going to say straight away. But MedEntry, for me, in terms of my actual UCAT and MedEntry, it was a little bit harder. And honestly, I think it's really good to over-prepare as opposed to under-prepare, because Medify is slightly easier in a few sections. So MedEntry is better in the sense that you will be more prepared. Like when I went into MedEntry and I did the AR, it felt like light work compared to any of the patterns that MedEntry had. So by over-preparing, you are doing yourself a favour. So I would recommend MedEntry, but both of them are really good. And in terms of getting them cheaper, they have some really good widening participation stuff. But obviously, I know not everyone falls into that. But if you do, take advantage of it. If you don't fall into widening participation, I actually got my MedEntry really discounted because I did this thing where you speak to your teacher and they nominate a student who worked really hard. And in my school, I was the president of the Medicine Dentistry Society. So I said to my teacher, yo, can you nominate me and email MedEntry about me? And he was like, sure. And then it meant that instead of paying, I think I got it for half price or something, my MedEntry, yeah. It was honestly really good. So speak to these little things. Take a look at these loopholes that you can find. and try and sort of exhaust all of them. Whether it's Medify or MedEntry, just try and use it and try and get it for free if you can. But honestly, they're not too expensive and they're okay to use. So yeah, I recommend them. Check out Questa. It's got all the resources for every step of your medicine application. And yeah, now I'm just going to very quickly say how to plan your revision. So in terms of timing, try and do 2 hours a day. Whether this is 2 hours of a skill builder, whether it's 2 hours of doing questions non-stop, aim for 2 hours daily and then do your reflections on top. In total, it should go to like 3 hours because you're doing 2 hours of questions and 1 hour reflecting, but it could be 2.5 hours or 2 hours 45. You know what I mean? You know, it can bounce around there. And take break days. Not every day needs to be a day where you prep. If you're just thinking about the UCAT all the time, you're just going to stress yourself out and make yourself worse. And if you've done, it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if you've prepped for every single one of these days, and on Thursday you're feeling a bit tired, and you know you're going to do a bit rubbish on a mock, just take a day off. Don't think about UCAT. Just be yourself for a day. Maybe go outside, maybe go shopping, go for a walk, that sort of thing. You don't have to do prep every single day. And this was really actually prevalent for me when my actual UCAT came. So my actual UCAT was on a Monday, and then the week before, I'll just use these ones here, I've been doing mocks every single day. And on the Friday, I just felt so tired. So I just gave it a skip. I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do any mocks. I'm just going to relax. Because at the end of the day, if you're tired when your actual UCAT happens, you will show that you're tired when it comes to your score. So don't do that. 6 to 8 weeks of prep are needed, yep. Aim for 6 to 8 weeks of this sort of stuff daily, 6 days or 7 days a week. Aim for 6 to 8 weeks of it. If you're in Australia, though, obviously, I think there are higher boundaries, so you might want to consider prepping some more. One thing to remember as well with the UCAT is, I'm just going to draw a really quick graph. Let's say this is time, and let's say this is performance in UCAT. It's really easy for you to peak and end up falling off, and that's why rest breaks are so important. So let's say when you first start off, you're rubbish at it. As time goes on, you get better, and then you get really, really good. You peak, you get to your peak performance right here, and because you're doing so much, you end up burning out and falling down really quickly, yeah? So if you burn yourself out because you just keep prepping, you will do crap in your actual UCAT because you're not giving yourself a break. So make sure that you take breaks, whether it's 1 day off a week, whether it's 2, or whether it's something more if you're not feeling well. Not every day has to be a day where you prep. Just make sure to look after yourself. Don't worry if you've not booked it yet. I'm hoping everyone's booked it, but to be honest, it's not deep if you haven't, because I booked my one late. I didn't book it on the day they opened. They open more slots as time goes on. And don't save mocks either. Loads of my friends were like, oh yeah, I'm saving mocks before my UCAT. Don't bother doing that. MedEntry's got what, 20? Medify's got 20. You're never finishing them. I only did like 13 of them. So don't worry about saving them for the end, because there'll always be more resources. You saw it yourself. There's a bunch of different things here that we've got. So if one of them runs out, you just move on to the other one. And yeah, if you're doing BMAT, don't worry about it yet. But preparing for decision making is also very good prep for your BMAT section 1. So don't worry about your BMAT yet. Focus on your UCAT. Make sure you get your personal statement done first as well, in my opinion. Just don't end up like having to do everything at once in September, October. Just give yourself time. Take the medical application step by step. Don't burn yourself out. And yeah, I hope it was beneficial, guys. If you've got any questions, please let me know now in the chat. Otherwise, that's everything for today. No worries at all. No worries, guys. But if you have any more questions, just ping me or ping someone else. It's fine. Obviously, UCAT prep will be more important, but how much of Year 12 stuff should we go over summer? Year 12 stuff to go over summer. Make sure you're confident, because at the end of the day, you are not going to get into med school if you get a good UCAT, get a good BMAT, do your interviews, get an offer, and then you flop your A-levels. Don't let your A-levels fall behind. So many of my friends are like, oh yeah, I'm putting my A-levels on the back burner for a bit. Don't do that. Don't forget about them, okay? Make sure that when you go into Year 13, you are 100% confident with everything you did in Year 12. Because for Maths, Bio, Chem, my A-levels, it built upon the things you learnt in Year 12. So if you're not good at it, then you're not going to be good at year 13 stuff. But in terms of how much you should go over, if you're feeling confident, then it's perfectly fine, yeah? But don't go out of your way to say, oh my god, I need to start revising for my A-levels or something like that. Just go over the bits you're not too confident with so that you're calm when it comes to year 13. I don't want to go to any UCAT uni, so not stress too hard about it. You should definitely stress about it, because the thing is, well, okay, don't stress about it, but you should definitely work hard at it. Don't just forget it completely, because yeah, you might not want to go to a UCAT university, but you have no guarantee of how your BMAT's going to go, because you set your BMAT after you submit your options. So you want to have your UCAT there, and you want to just have one, maybe two universities for UCAT that you have, and you can say, okay, I'm guaranteed an interview at these universities because I got a decent UCAT. Yeah? Don't just forget about the other ones straight away. Do we get the results on the day? Yeah. So, alright, so like, in terms of what happens when you do your UCAT, you walk in, there are some lockers, and there's a desk. You go up to the desk, and you say, yo, this is my name, I'm here to sit the UCAT, and then they give you a key. So then you take off your bag, whatever you've got with you, you put it into a locker, then you lock it. And the only thing you bring with you is your passport, or your ID, whatever it is. You then walk into the room, and in the room, essentially how it looks is there are computers. It's the same as a driving test, theory test room. There are a bunch of computers, and they've got these blue walls in between them, so you can't see the person next to you. And it's kind of nice, to be honest. It's kind of isolated, and you're on your own for a bit. So you sit down, and the screen is ready for you. It just says, "This is the UCAT. Press N or press Alt N or press Next when you're ready." And then you put your key on your desk. You put your ID on the desk. They've got a set of earplugs there, and they've got some noise cancelling headphones as well. I put both of them on because I'm terrible at like working when there's noise, so I put both of them on, and then you just get started. And they won't talk to you during the exam, but you're not allowed to have your phone or anything like that there. That's how it looks like essentially when you go into the UCAT. But yeah, don't like forget about the UCAT completely, because you don't know how your BMAT's gonna go. So have some guarantees there. The only guy I know who applied to 4 BMAT universities was the guy who missed his UCAT. He's in my year. Bro just forgot to go to his UCAT, I'm not gonna lie. He just forgot, and he had to apply to 4 BMAT universities. And obviously that's a really big risk because you have no guarantee. Yeah, he got in. He got into Lancaster. He applied UCL, Lancaster, Brighton, and Leeds. Yeah. How do the sections work in terms of time? Does it lock you out if time runs out? Yeah, so once time runs out, it just says your time is finished for this section. You now have a 1 minute break before your next section starts, or 5 minutes if you've got extra time or whatever. So it says you now have a break. You can finish that break early if you want to. I finished it early for a few of mine because it feels like a pretty long time when you're there, and you can just go on to it. If you finish a section early, you can just go on to the next section if you want to as well. But with the UCAT, you're not going to finish any section early. Any more questions? How to get better than 600? Take a look at the recording of this, because I went through some techniques already, and I know you weren't here for that part. So if you still have some confusion afterwards, then you can ask me. But take a look at the recording. I'm going to upload it onto Discord, hopefully. I'm hoping that it's not too big, but yeah. Any more questions? Should I get both MedEntry or Medify? No. If you have a choice between them, I would recommend MedEntry. But of course, it's what your personal circumstances are saying and all that. But I would recommend MedEntry. Could you also upload the document you're going through? Yeah, I'm going to upload this as a annotate. Actually, do you guys want these annotations? They're kind of useless. I'll just upload the plain one. Okay, calm. I'll upload the plain one, and I'll upload the one with these annotations, and I'll put that into admissions announcements, hopefully. And yeah, I'll do that today. But yeah, that's all the questions, guys. I hope it was beneficial for you, and hopefully I'll see you at the next event. I want to do some more SJT stuff, hopefully, and some more UCAT stuff, and we'll build a little squad on this server where we can just come together and do some UCAT stuff, you know what I mean? But yeah, hope it was beneficial. Oh yeah, guys, you don't need to stay in voice call anymore because the event's ended, didn't it? You guys can leave now. See you guys. Bye.